A greenhouse without a foundation is like a house without a floor. Let's build yours the right way. So, you won't be dealing with sinking, shifting, or storm damage later on. Hi, I'm Trevor with Greenhouse Emporium, and today we're going to tackle one of the most overlooked but yet essential parts of your greenhouse, its foundation. Because trust me, this is one of those things that you want to get right the first time. But before we get into the different types of foundations, let's talk about why the foundation matters. One of the most important questions that we do get asked is, do I really need a foundation for my greenhouse? And most emphatically, yes. You should absolutely use a greenhouse foundation, whether you're buying a greenhouse kit or building a DIY greenhouse yourself. See, a great foundation ensures that your greenhouse will last. It's not just about stability. It's about making your life easier during and after the setup. See, a solid and level foundation ensures your greenhouse stays anchored, prevents stress on the frame, and it really helps to increase its longevity. And plus, it keeps everything square so that your doors and your windows and such will function properly. And trust me, you don't want to skip this step. The foundation is literally the most important part of your greenhouse setup. Let's break it down into two main categories: slabs and perimeter foundations. A slab foundation is exactly what it sounds like: a solid pad that supports the entire greenhouse. Most people use concrete, but some prefer brick or other block-type materials. It's durable, long-lasting, and it gives you a clean ground that you can walk on. But there's always a downside. Okay, so for one, you can't grow in ground, which means you'll need to set up some raised beds, some shelving, hydroponics. Now, slabs, especially concrete, they can be huge heat sinks or cold sinks, which can be a good thing if utilized correctly. Let's say it stores the warmth of the sun and releases it during a cold night. Well, that's great. But if the heat is stored in the concrete during the summer, it makes it really hard to cool, especially if your summer evenings stay warm, like they do here in Central Texas. So knowing your climate and when you want to grow is pretty much the key to battling this. Soil? Now that is much better at regulating these extremes. And that's why, people mainly use it for battery climate greenhouses, which, we're going to be making a video and showing you guys about this here really soon. Now, slabs, they also require drainage solutions, to prevent the water from pooling around on them, but they don't store as much water as the soil does. So greenhouses with concrete foundations, they tend to be a little less humid. Then we have perimeter foundations. It creates a solid border around the greenhouse while leaving the center open. This is perfect if you want to go directly into the soil. Perimeter walls can be made from treated wood, concrete, or even bricks. One very important step is to anchor the wall directly to the ground. Now, we'll cover this in the next section when we start discussing materials. And I couldn't continue without telling you about a stem wall. It's basically a perimeter wall, but just a little bit higher. It's a great option, to raise up your greenhouse kit or to give your greenhouse just that little bit of extra visual appeal. It's usually 2-3 foot high, and you could use just about any material that we'll be talking about next. So that makes it pretty versatile. The simplest solution of them all is just to level the ground. Whether it's a full pad or a perimeter wall, it's a very cost-effective, but it's also the least sturdy. This is the absolute bare minimum for a greenhouse foundation. And it's mainly used for portable or temporary greenhouses. Especially if you're dealing with lots of rain and wind, this is not recommended. In order to create a level ground, you'll need some leveling materials like gravel and sand. You'll also need to compact that area to prevent any sort of sinking or shrinking. This can be done with a hand tamper for the smaller areas, or a larger plate compactor for your bigger, larger areas. Now, you can increase the stability by adding pavers to the corners and also in the centers of the walls. Now, remember, you still have to anchor your greenhouse down. That's a very important step. Okay, now, One thing to consider, some of the greenhouse kits will have optional foundation frames that you can put into a trench. Now, we just released a video on this just the other day, so with that in mind, other models, they will have brackets that you can use to drive anchors into the ground. Now, one point that I do want to reiterate is that this level ground installation is for temporary or portable buildings. It's highly discouraged to install a permanent greenhouse structure in this manner. You're going to regret it and it will not last. The second simplest greenhouse foundation is made of wood. It's affordable and easy to work with, but you may need replacements every few years or so. It's also not the most secure way to anchor your greenhouse. So, we would not recommend it if you're going to expect lots of wind or if you're in that windy area. So make sure to use rot-resistant types like cedar or pressure-treated wood for outdoor usage. Add a layer of gravel underneath it to improve the drainage and to prevent rot. You see, ground contact is usually what makes the wood rot. So now to anchor the wooden foundation, you can drive rebars through the wood into the ground and then attach the greenhouse to the foundation. Most of our greenhouse kits will come with brackets, to use to secure them or screw them onto that foundation. Some will even have attachments for using ground anchors. Now, this will help to secure everything as well. If you're more concerned, you can also use hurricane anchoring kits, which they'll run a strap over the top of your greenhouse and anchor it down on the sides. So now back to the wood. Now, what size of wood do you really need? We would recommend 4x4s or 2 layers of 2x4s. You want that wooden foundation to fit just to the outside dimensions of your greenhouse kit, or make it about 1 inch wider, unless of course your greenhouse manual tells you something a little bit different. To secure the beams to each other, you can use, corner brackets or inside plates on the outside. In the end, you can go back and fill these perimeter walls with soil or gravel. Now, some of our customers, they've used full decks as foundations. Well, I don't really recommend it because it will highly decrease the usability of your greenhouse. Heating it in the winter will be next to impossible with all that cold air seeping in through the gaps between the planks. Something to consider. Okay, let's move on from the more temporary foundations to the permanent ones. Concrete is the most secure, but also one of the most expensive and labor-intensive foundations. It will make a very solid and level greenhouse base. So that's one important thing. But this is also a very permanent setup that might require a permit depending on where you live. Concrete can be used as a perimeter wall, a slab, or just as a simple pier foundation. Which one you choose depends on your own goals and the greenhouse that you pick. For some of our greenhouse kits, it's recommended to embed the anchors into the concrete foundation. You'd essentially leave about a 4-inch wide hole where these anchor brackets would go into. And then you would assemble your greenhouse, making sure that it's level and square, and then you would go back and embed the corner brackets into the concrete. This is the most secure way of anchoring a glass greenhouse. All 4 corners cemented into the concrete. Here are a few more tips for a more secure concrete foundation. Make sure to install rebar reinforcement to strengthen that concrete. You also want to plan for drainage and expansion, especially in the case of utilizing a concrete slab. There's a whole lot more to watch out for when pouring concrete. If you'd like a whole video on concrete foundations, let me know in the comments. We'll see what we can do. A less expensive but still very sturdy foundation can be built with concrete blocks. It's durable and requires a little less effort to install compared to concrete. Most people use these for perimeter walls or for stem walls. One thing you do want to remember is to always check for the levelness with a long beam and use mortar to secure the blocks in place. For best results, use rebar to anchor the blocks to the ground. They need to be attached to the blocks though, and this would require some concrete. Double check that your blocks are level before you set them, and attach your greenhouse to the wall for security. Now, concrete blocks may not look as nice, But you can add, a faux brick or a tile or other materials to make them blend in with the rest of your beautiful landscape. If you're looking for a more aesthetic solution, you may want to use bricks. Whether it's for a stem wall or just a slab, it's a long-lasting, but it can be one of the most expensive options out of all of them. Bricks need careful placement with mortar, especially to get them, even for attaching the greenhouse frame without any sort of gaps. Take that extra time to create that level foundation layer, because at this point, small mistakes can cause major issues when you get ready to assemble your greenhouse from that wall up. And I couldn't finish this video without talking about harsher weather. For those in colder climates, you might need a deep winter foundation. Now, what is this? A deep winter foundation is a perimeter wall that goes deep into the ground, below the frost line, with added insulation that just helps to keep the greenhouse warmer in those freezing temperatures. You see, by insulating the walls and possibly adding some thermal barrier underneath that structure, you can reduce the heating needs and expand your growing seasons without much running cost. Some people go as far as sinking the greenhouse so that they can avoid that frosty soil level, altogether. So as you can see, each material has its own strengths. So pick what works best for you, for your budget, and for your environment. Now, before I wrap this up, here are some quick last-minute tips to make sure your foundation is a success. Location matters. Pick a level spot and avoid low areas prone to flooding. Kind of like this. We couldn't use this area because it does tend to flood. Utility access. Plan for electricity and water before building. The best way is to have PVC pipes in place so that you can attach them to your water and run wires or power cords through them. Kind of like what we did here. Preparation is key. Have the city mark utility lines before you start digging. Very important. Know your climate. Choose materials and installation that suit your weather conditions. Seal gaps. You might see gaps where the foundation meets the greenhouse. Make sure to seal all of these gaps with caulking, or for the larger gaps, you can use materials like expanding foam or other materials. Backer rod, for instance. And one quick reminder. If you're thinking about going big with your greenhouse, check your local zoning laws first. Some areas require permits for larger greenhouses or for more permanent structures. Now, which foundation are you considering for your greenhouse? Drop us a comment below, and I'll try to help you figure out the very best option for your setup. Thanks for watching. We'll catch y'all later.